This is the Palin Update on Saranet Radio. I'm Kevin Scholla.
There are going to be some tough primaries, and I think that's good. Competition in these primaries is good. Competition makes us work harder and be more efficient and produce more.
Sarah Palin has warned that 2012 will not only be the year to get rid of Obama and liberal Democrats in Congress, but also a chance to challenge those Republicans that are simply not getting things done. Many conservatives are taking heed of those words and going after GOP incumbents. One hot race where an upset may be brewing is in Indiana, where longtime Senator Dick Lugar is facing the state's treasurer, a true conservative, Richard Mourdock. And the momentum for his campaign is mounting. Some top conservatives have backed his efforts, and many are pointing to this matchup as one that is winnable come primary day in the Hoosier State. Today, he's here with us. Indiana State Treasurer Richard Mourdock here on the Palin Update on Saranet Radio. Mr. Mourdock, thank you for coming on.
Well, thanks. Great to be with you this evening.
Now, we've taken a look at your website over the past few weeks, and it says right there, proven conservative leadership. Is that exactly what we're not seeing from Richard Lugar, the man you're running against?
Well, it certainly is. You know, he's earned the nickname that MSNBC gave him a couple years ago, which is that he is Barack Obama's favorite Republican. And anyone who carries that moniker certainly can't be seen as much of a conservative in this day and time.
You know, Governor Palin has warned that it's not just Democrats that we're going after here in 2012, but also Republicans who are simply not getting the job done. She said many will be primaried out. How's that working out for you so far, running against a fellow party member? It takes some courage to do this. Well,
I don't know that it takes courage. It just takes application of principle. You know, the day I announced, which was back in February 22nd, on that day, I released a list of 3/4 of Indiana's county Republican chairmen who signed on to support my candidacy, and over half of the Republican State Committee. We have tremendous support within the party, as well as the Tea Party movement here in Indiana, which is absolutely huge. The Tea Parties came together, had a nominating convention in September of this year, and I won their nomination by, I think it was a vote of 94-1. So we've got support across the spectrum here of conservatives, and we're doing incredibly well. Polls show us leading in one head-to-head, and we expect to win next May.
Now, you may have answered this a little bit there, but do you feel you'll get the support of the moderate GOP after you win the primary? So often we see sour grapes after a Republican loses, and on the flip side, the Dems always seem to stick together right away. You remember how brutal the Obama versus Hillary fight was, but, you know, she went up there shortly after defeat, put on a pantsuit and a smile, and said, you know, she wholeheartedly endorsed him, and you know that wasn't, you know, I don't know, you got the feeling that she was, you know, biting her lip there a little bit on the way out. But on the flip side, sir, the Republican primaries, when the dust clears sometime, the winner is left in the lurch, especially if that winner's a conservative. You look at Brett Schundler in New Jersey back in 2001. He stunned the establishment, won the nomination fair and square, and then the company line Republicans were less than enthusiastic. Nationally, people might remember when George W. Bush in 2000 basically had to campaign for John McCain's endorsement before he could campaign for the presidency. And then most recently, you look what they did to Christine O'Donnell in Delaware after she won the primary. She was basically left to twist in the general election wind with, you know, no establishment support at all. So, one, what's the deal with that? You don't see that with Democrats. You mostly see that with Republicans. And two, do you think you'll be okay after you get the nomination?
Well, to the second part first, absolutely, because Indiana is not Delaware, nor is it New Jersey. And on behalf of all Hoosiers, I say thank heavens to that. You know, this is a very red state. And in 2008, in the last presidential election year, Barack Obama actually won this state. He was the first Democrat presidential candidate to win since Lyndon Johnson. And in part, the reason why he won was because Dick Lugar allowed himself to appear in a TV commercial, which was seen as a tacit endorsement for Barack Obama. It was in one of Obama's campaign commercials. So it's that type of baggage, if you will, that Mr. Lugar is carrying among Republican primary voters. When this primary is done, I have absolute certainty Republicans are going to come back together behind the nominee, and I expect to be the nominee.
And as far as when we've seen this in the past in some other places, though, with even nationally, when Bush in 2000, he had to kind of go on a little grassroots campaign just to get McCain and some people on board. But you don't seem to see that. Kerry got the nod and everybody was on board. Clinton, same thing. Is that a party problem? Because the Democrats seem to all be so far left right now in this country, whereas opposed to the Republican Party's a little more of a bigger tent?
Well, I think the Republican Party is certainly a bigger tent, and the very nature of Republicans, we tend to be more independent. That's, we don't like to be in lockstep with party leadership all the time. But I really sense here in Indiana that there is a clear understanding of the difference between the Democratic Party today and the Republican Party today. And when the Democratic Party is being led by the likes of Barack Obama, Chuck Schumer, the Nancy Pelosi's, the far left wing, Republicans, even of a moderate stripe here in Indiana, aren't buying into that at all. And independents here in Indiana have seen that, tasted a little bit of it from the 2002 and 8 campaign, and they're now going the other way in droves. So I think we're going to see that somewhat nationally, but the trend is even more conservative here in Indiana than in the nation as a whole.
Now, you certainly appeal to many Palin backers. I've spoken to a lot of Palin supporters who have looked at your race, whether they're in Indiana to be able to pull the lever for you or maybe help in other ways from other states. Your views are quite similar on many of the issues. Do you plan on talking to her about throwing her support behind you?
Well, we've had some discussions with Sarah Pack already, and we're watching, hoping with interest she will get behind our campaign. Certainly this is the kind of race that she's gone out on a limb for, if you want to use that expression, a time or two. I am clearly a conservative. I am willing to challenge the establishment at times. Certainly I'm doing that right here in Indiana right now. The more traditional, conventional Republicans, establishment Republicans, have supported Dick Lugar for 36 years, and they're not quitting right now, even though I often hear from many of them they just wish he hadn't run again. But the fact that he did, they're going for him. That makes it a little tough for us here within the state, but again, the sense of where he is politically these days, he's left the Republican reservation, he's no longer on the conservative side, and that's working to our advantage. I certainly hope Governor Palin and all conservatives come to our aid, because we certainly need their help.
Kevin Scholla on Saranet Radio. This is the Palin Update, and we are happy to be joined today by Indiana's Treasurer, Richard Mourdock, who is challenging Dick Lugar for his seat, long time holding that seat for Lugar, and the conservative Mourdock here making a push for an upset. Now, you already have an impressive bunch of conservatives supporting you. Can you talk a little bit about that, and does that make you feel even more confident having some big names in your corner?
Absolutely. Having people like Steve Forbes get on board with us very early, Morton Blackwell, Mark Levin, Dick Morris has done no less than 3 different events for us at this point. I mean, those people have come forward. Americans, Conservative Union, the Citizens United groups, Gun Owners of America. We've got all kinds of conservative groups that are coming to help us, and we greatly appreciate it. And even from the Tea Party side, Tea Party Express has come on board, Freedom Works has come on board to endorse us, so we've got tremendous momentum. There was a poll done here in July, at the end of July, and Republican voters were asked the question, and simply read a statement that said, Dick Lugar's had a long, distinguished career, but I believe it's time for someone else. They were then asked to agree or disagree. 69% of Republicans agree with that statement. When 69% of your own party says it's time for you to step away, you ought to be listening. In a sense, I hate to see Dick Lugar, who's had a long, distinguished career, I hate to see his last effort be a losing campaign, but that's where it's headed, and we're set to win this race, and we intend to.
See that? We were a little hard on New Jersey earlier, but, you got Forbes there, so not all bad in the Garden State, right?
True enough.
Another good basketball state, too. Yeah. So how about this? Tell us some bullet points, and you can get specific, too,
sure.
What you would bring to the Senate, why folks should support Richard Mourdock. If you want to contrast with Lugar, you can, but just you as a guy and what you stand for.
Sure. My elevator speech, if you will. Number one, we've got to reduce the immoral level of debt that we are carrying in this country. As state treasurer, believe me, I understand those issues and the consequences. Number two, we have to change the tax code in America from taxing the creation of wealth to taxing consumption. When 47% of Americans have no skin in the game, they don't care how big government gets. They need to have a part of the cost of government be their responsibility. Last but not least, we have to get the jackboot of federal government regulations off the neck of small businesses. If we hope to have our economy recover, we've got three critical industries: finance, healthcare, and energy, that we have to get back on track.
And I just want some folks to get an idea about you as a man, too. You've done some incredible work outside of politics. You're a marathon runner and a pilot, and probably most impressive, you've been active in Christian missions overseas. What was that like?
That was, you sometimes go on those mission trips with the idea you're going to change the world a little bit, and you find out you do because you change yourself. I spent time down in what's known as the Campo, the jungles of Bolivia, and been down there on a half a dozen different occasions over the years. And when you see people with next to nothing, and you see how they yearn just to have the types of freedoms and opportunity that we have, it causes you to see this great country differently, and it truly does changes your life forever. And it's a time for perspective that, frankly, I wish all Americans had, because if they did, I think they would see the world differently, and yes, more conservatively, and they would also expect their government to be less a burden in their daily lives.
It's good stuff. That's very good stuff. It's amazing how you learn. Some people who could hardly have anything, and then you see some folks here, and people not even going to the polls and voting, and some appreciation that isn't there that you see in other places.
It is shocking, and I will never forget. We were down in Bolivia shortly after a flood, and a young man that I'd met in one of the previous trips, I was speaking to him. My Spanish is a little broken, but he was explaining to me how he and his wife and their two daughters had fortunately survived the flood, had not lost anything because they had a Rubbermaid wash basin, and they were able to put everything in the wash basin and walk out with it. So they didn't lose anything because everything they owned was in that wash basin. That makes you see the world differently. Puts it
into perspective. I want folks to take a look at your website, too. It's richardmourdock.com, and that is Richard Mourdock, Mourdock.com. Sir, thank you so much. We're checking this out. We're watching it closely, and, the momentum's there. You snowball this thing and see what happens.
Well, thank you. We have a little over 4 months till the primary. We're doing very well. Head-to-head matchup shows us leading, but we take nothing for granted. We need help from all over the country, and we appreciate that reference to richardmourdock.com.
We saw what happened earlier in this year when some of the Republicans, it's not just Democrats, some of the Republicans in Congress and in the Senate, they want to play ball with this president, and you see what happens when you do that. And Governor Palin said, you know what, well, there's primaries before there are general elections, and I think you got a real shot here to make a splash. And you know what, it's contagious, too. People see what you're doing right now. We're going to see a lot of candidates springing up, I believe.
Well, I think we will. And, when Senator Lugar, during the lame duck session, pushed the START Treaty on behalf of Barack Obama, co-sponsored the DREAM Act on behalf of Barack Obama, and voted against earmarks, voted against reforming earmarks, that set the stage for this race. Clearly, he's walked away from any conservative positions. In the last couple of weeks, almost amusingly now, he's suddenly proclaiming, oh, I'm a conservative, look how I'm voting now. But after the last few years, these most recent votes aren't going to count for much with the people of Indiana. They know who the true conservative is in this race.
That's a great point, and that's really amazing because you see some of the Republicans elected right now that folks look at as moderates. Usually it's the social issues where they stray from the party, but for someone to say no to earmarks with our economy and the way Congress is spending right now, that I think you could run on that alone.
Even more than that, during the session here recently when they were arguing over the super committee where they were trying to cut $1.2 trillion, 2 votes came up in the U.S. Senate, one to cut $6 million from an airports bill, one to cut $1 billion from a rural development agency. Dick Lugar voted against both of those cuts. If you won't make the small cuts, you're never going to make the big ones. And I mentioned before, being a state treasurer, I understand the consequences of spending more than you take in. Here in Indiana, we're the best fiscal health of any state because we've had sound fiscal management. Our credit rating's gone up in the last 2 years. That's the kind of leadership we need in D.C., not what we're seeing.
All right, sir. Listen, pedal to the metal. We'll get you on again as we get closer.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Good talking with you.
Okay, take care. Richard Mourdock making noise in Indiana, and people are listening. Be sure to check out richardmourdock.com. Again, that's Mourdock, Mourdock. This past week, Governor Palin issued some heartfelt messages. She wished a Merry Christmas to everyone, and she stressed Christmas is a holiday for all. She blasted the war on Christmas and said it's sad and ironic that Grinches are at war with the celebration of the birth of Jesus. The governor also extended greetings to those celebrating Hanukkah, saying the story never ceases to inspire because it reminds us of the power of faith, hope, and perseverance. Governor Palin always lifting the spirits of others. I hope all of you had a Merry Christmas and a Happy Hanukkah as we gear up for a big 2012. Well, that'll just about do it for this edition of the Palin Update on SaraNet Radio. Be sure to visit saranetradio.net for continuing coverage of Governor Palin. Also, follow us on Twitter at SaraNet Radio, and we're now on Facebook, so make sure you like SaraNet Radio on Facebook. I want to thank everyone here at SaraNet Radio. Thanks to Indiana Treasurer and Senate candidate Richard Mourdock. And thank you for listening today. Please be sure to join us again next time for another edition of the Palin Update. I'm Kevin Scholla. Have a pleasant day, and Happy New Year!